It's the Redbird Reboot podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Redbird Reboot.
Hello there, Arizona Cardinals fans. Welcome into the Redbird Reboot podcast. You've got Blake Murphy, 7, and Pancake Soul, a.k.a. Marcos Labrada. Guys, we got our film study that's happening this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll also talk a little bit about the matchup with the Redbirds going up against the Houston Texans. Something that I think the biggest thing, of course, is we got some other news to talk about that's popped up today. First and most importantly is going to be regarding current player. Paris Johnson is not going to play in this upcoming game. We don't know if he's been shut down. He's not going to IR, but he could miss some time, potentially multiple weeks. We also are talking about Trey Benson not activated off of injured reserve. He will stay there, and his season is officially over. Cardinals are still going to be down at receiver this week because we're talking about how Greg Dortch is on IR. Marvin Harrison Jr. is still not practicing. And it's one of those areas where it's going to be really interesting to be able to see what goes on because it could be another Michael Wilson week as a result. Also, of course, we're going to be able to look at just a huge and heavy week as far as with the Cardinals for what their fortunes look like in the following week up against the Atlanta Falcons. But before we get into all of that and some positives that we can take away from the Cardinals game, surprising as it was, with the offensive line, Marcos, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I feel for the first time that I've done an extensive research on a certain thing. Most of the time when I'm doing like film study, I'm like focusing like on this and on that because most of the time you read what's going on, you want to figure out what the heck is the problem. This time today, I actually was surprised about the PFF grade by John Gaines II, and it's been a joy watching his film breakdown. So it kind of made me change my mind about him being the potential starting left guard, if that's even going to be a possibility.
Yeah, I think that we've seen with Gaines, we've talked about for a while that he's had veterans in front of him. He's been able to fill in. He's been at least without Kelvin Beachum in a backup role because he's had start with Jonah Williams and his season over. You're talking about a guy who is in his pretty critical third years, drafted under Monty Ossenfort right away in his 2023 season, is entering into a contract year. Something that was a huge positive coming out of the game, like you said, with the grades is just the fact that the Arizona Cardinals have at least a decent enough direction that they can go into next season by bringing in another right guard, moving Gaines to right guard, having someone Isaiah Adams, who also had one of the, I believe it was the third best Pro Football Focus grade as far as the Cardinals were considered overall. It was the second best in offense. Isaiah Adams tested into the top 5 as well. His pass blocking has improved. That's one of the cases where he wasn't tested as much, I think, with Braden Fisk as potentially, you want to talk about a Jeffrey Simmons sort, but we can at least be able to say that the young guns on the team, between them, Michael Wilson, a lot of good stuff for those 2023 and 2024 draft picks who've had to start the last couple of weeks due to injuries on the Cardinals line and in the Cardinals receiver room.
Yeah, that's like best case scenario when it comes to developing your team because I've always preached that you take offensive line like often and you take them like, in the second, third, fourth, or fifth round, but you take them on every single draft because you want to create a pipeline and you want to get, you want to be the typecast like, hey, what do I want? Do I want an athletic guard? You get your athletic guard. Do I want a beefy guard? You get your beefy guard. If you get lucky and somebody falls, you make sure you always, every single time there's a faller that's supposed to be in the second or the first round, you always try to pick them up. That's why I kept making the case for the Cardinals not keeping Josh Jones because he was projected to be like a 1B, like a first round, but later, like in the first round, like the 20s, 25, and 30s. Obviously,
Right.
we picked him up in the third round, but it doesn't matter. He's gone anyway. But the whole point is when you see these guys and you don't throw them out to the wolves, and then their confidence gets shot and they just look horrible, and how we feel, the crowd will start chanting for somebody else to step in and whatnot. That confidence is huge for their development, because it could throw off their career for the future, because they might even feel like, hey, I put bad tape out there, I got to go somewhere else that I might have to fight for a starting spot, and they might not even give it to me.
Yeah, it's something that we've talked a lot about when it comes to playing the game of football and sports in general. It comes down to confidence. The Marvin Harrison Jr. catch for that touchdown he had against the Seahawks after having a really rough first half, the bounce back in the second half to get back to those, I think it was 76 or so yards plus the touchdown. It just showed how that confidence then carried forward over the next few games. Now, that being said, Marcos, when it comes to confidence, I have a really hard time being confident in the Cardinals this week because of just the number of guys on the injury report. So what we're going to be able to at least talk about here, and I'll do this on a larger screen for those of you to be able to take a look. This is a long, lengthy list of did not practice on Wednesday. Now, it sounds like Budda Baker and Kelvin Beachum, it's been rest. Alvin Brown, he's been out due to the birth of his son, is what we're assuming. He had a kid that was due near the end of the year, from what we know, based off of an Instagram post. It was either Donnie Druin or Teo Mackey were the ones who at least pointed that out. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is still not practicing. We know that Paris Johnson is going to be out. Bilal Nichols is probably going to be out. Josh Sweat, they just are letting him rest on Wednesdays. Adrian Taylor-Demison still not practicing. They also, Jalen Thompson got hurt in the last game. His hamstring has been having issues. Dalvin Tomlinson did not practice. He's getting rest as he's a little bit, he's like 34 years old, I believe. Still younger than, of course, Calais Campbell, who did practice. And, of course, Xavier Weaver was not out there as well. Guys who were limited were LJ Collier. Amari DiMercato may end up missing yet another week. Christian Jones is still on IR. It may be that he gets activated, but he's still limited in practice. Max Belton has a heel injury after playing special teams, so he's been limited. Walter Nolan, however, was back practicing, and Will Johnson with a thumb injury was actually full back at practice. As for the other side, as basically Trent Brown, Nick Chubb, Kamari Lassiter is a really interesting one. He had an interception the last week in their win against the Chiefs. Woody Marks is their starting running back. They've had a good play out of Sheldon Rankins, but the rest of the players, at least Bryant, Hill, Speed, and Watson, have all been limited at practice. We are likely to see them this week. It's lengthy, Marcos. This is something where when you're talking about the end of the year and more guys potentially either, maybe not shutting down is the right term, but they are sitting right now at a 3-10 record. There's not that much to play for. We'll talk a little bit about, is this the kind of signs of a team that's giving up, or is this something to rally behind where injuries are happening? But either way, this is such a lengthy injury report that it's really hard to be able to see the Cardinals getting enough bodies out there to have a good sample size against what is a brutal Texans defense, maybe the best in the league. They've had the second, I believe, toughest schedule in the league. Arizona Cardinals, toughest schedule in the league. The biggest difference between them, Marcos, though, is that the Cardinals are 3-10 and the Texans are second in the AFC South with, I believe this year it is a sorry, let me double check at least just to make sure I don't get this wrong for the I'm taking a look here. 8-5. I almost said 9-3, but I knew there weren't 9-win team. I just wanted to make sure they were 8 wins. So 8-5 Houston Texans team. That's something that I'm very much anxious to be able to see if the Cardinals are able to even put up a fight, because on offense you're missing your starting right tackle. You've got Kelvin Beachum in there. You're missing your starting left tackle for sure. We don't know if you're going to get your starting left guard back, and your right guard is definitely with Will Hernandez, has still been hurt, is going back to injured reserves. So you're going to be trotting out essentially an entire offensive line of backups minus starting center, Charlte Froholt. Against these Texans edge rushers, it's really difficult for me to see positives. We can talk about some of the positives of the offensive line on the interior, but against these edges with Josh Fryer, he was, I believe, according to Pro Football Focus, one of the lowest ranked players of the Arizona Cardinals. He was actually up there with, Kelvin Beachum was the lowest ranked at least. Josh Fryer took over for a little while. He got more snaps at right tackle, whereas I believe Paris Johnson played through the most of the game. He did take over after a little while at left tackle. It's brutal, brother. I don't know of any other way to be able to say it, but going into these final 4 games, it's going to put into perspective there was a report from I believe it was Jeremy Fowler was talking at least earlier, and he said that he had guessed could take 1 to 2 more games to potentially, for sure, ensure the safety of Jonathan Gannon. With these sort of injuries, you can almost, one, create a painting that says, hey, here's what the painting would have looked like. We just were not healthy this year. That's what really the painting just, it got wrecked, it got dropped, like we ran out of paint. Like that's one of the things where you can be able to say that's the results for this year is just due to the sheer amount of injuries. On the other hand, you can also take a look at that and say if Jonathan Gannon is going to go 1-14 down the stretch where the Cardinals only get 1 win after their first 2 games of the season, that's brutal. Steve Wilkes did not survive that type of level, and he was a brand new head coach. Cliff Kingsbury did not survive his 3-win season. He had just gotten a contract extension. It would seem like that would put a lot of questions into if Jonathan Gannon can win 1 or 2 more games, if that is going to be what he's held to the rest of the season. I'm curious in your thoughts, Marcos. Do you think that the Cardinals and Jonathan Gannon need 1 or 2 more wins against one of the Texans, the Falcons, which we'll talk about, the Bengals, and of course the potentially resting their players, resting at least Matthew Stafford, Los Angeles Rams to end the year?
Well, that's supposedly like the magic number because at that point we'd like win 5 games and whatnot. It wouldn't look like a total loss, but I'm not even convinced that even if they do win those 2 games, that there's going to be any difference. Like if they lose out from here on out, the only changes that we're probably going to see is just on the offensive coordinator side. I don't even think the defensive coordinator's even on the hot seat, at least when it comes to them. And Jonathan Gannon is just going to go with the excuse, and so is Monty Ossenfort, that this is a year of heck, and the injuries have taken. Like basically, this year has been overtaken by injuries, and the quarterback, that they decided to go with and whatnot, actually ended up like getting injured the majority of the year, and we know that's kind of like a lie because I feel like Kyler Murray's actually
He was
like
practicing just before, and then suddenly he's back in IR again. And they said there was no setback. If there had been a setback, we think it would have probably been widely reported. Just feels like you said, they're on the outs with the QB.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I feel like this year it really is. I really don't know if there's going to even be a difference if they do win those 2 games or if they don't. But the 2 games is like the magic number, quote unquote.
Yep, that's what we'll find out. I think the 1 game probably with a 4-win season would be questionable. It would more likely do damage to the Cardinals as far as draft picks and draft stock goes. But it could be beneficial ultimately as far as if the Cardinals do lose out for their draft stock, draft status. That's one of the things that we could talk about, especially if they're in the quarterback market, as we believe that they are. I don't think there's anyone who thinks that Kyler Murray is going to be back for another season. One of the comments here from Accelerator, thank you for joining us here at halftime of our show, talks about Matt LaFleur being on the outs with the Cardinals management. Would love to see him be here. That's something at least that is a rumor. My guess is fundamentally, if you're a winning team and a winning franchise, you rarely ever end up firing the head coach, because if you do end up firing the head coach, that ends up turning into a situation like the Tennessee Titans are facing, where in the Tennessee Titans, they fired Mike Vrabel. He'd gotten them to the playoffs, had 1 down year. They basically let him walk, and now he's right back there getting wins again. Philadelphia Eagles, a good example, at least too, where Andy Reid needed to reset. He goes to the Chiefs. Chiefs continuously make the playoffs, while the Eagles end up making a Super Bowl in a couple of years, but ended up bottoming out after that before they rose back up into the NFL elite. It's something that I think is a case where even with Florida and Mike McDaniel, he has gotten those team to 6-7. They've won a couple of games in a row. It seems like his job may be safe. What it comes down to in this league, Marcos, is winning games. And if Matt LaFleur is on the outs, if the goal has been we want you to be a Super Bowl contender, I think it may be not this year, but let's say next year the Packers lose out in the playoffs to the Bears and the Lions, and we end up seeing another 4th-ranked team in that division, such as the Vikings, figure out their quarterback situation, get back into it. That's where I think we could end up seeing. But yes, as Accelerator says, being able to see what is gone with all of that. Let's wrap up here with our halftime talking about got to give Bam Knight some credit. He's performed well and gives his all. Even last week, Cardinals were just throwing the ball like crazy. Wasn't a good matchup against a strong Rams defensive line. Bam Knight has honestly been, like you said, capable, not just in terms of fantasy stats. Like he has been showing that he can be a starting running back in the league, maybe not a high level starting running back, such as how James Conner was for the franchise, or how the team is hoping that the heir could be in a Trey Benson. But he has been, as they found, a kind of gem that they were able to find who took onto the active roster ahead of Michael Carter, has had some burst, been able to go off and score touchdowns despite being on a rough situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just that as I pay attention to how this running game has been performing and whatnot, there's always like one little minor detail that kind of throws everything off and it causes some sort of issue with trying to get to where they need to get to as a running back or what gap he needs to hit. But then some person in some like position and whatnot doesn't get to where he needs to get to or doesn't make a proper block or he just doesn't do what he needs to do and it kind of blows up the play after that. So I've been paying attention to against the LA Rams, who obviously demolished us and we weren't even running the ball versus them because they were so dominant versus us. I paid attention to that and I thought and I kept seeing some stuff that I was like, wow, just clean that up, maybe we would be able to get ourselves a better run game. I don't understand why we have to take a step back after last year when we know the scheme and they know how to block or how to pass protect.
Yep. That's something that's very it's going to be really interesting to see, I think, at least. Marcos, we've got a little bit of good positive news to talk about the Cardinals. We already mentioned John Gaines and we mentioned a little bit of Isaiah Adams, just looking at the interior offensive line play. And we always love to go through our film study every single week. And you've got some good gems for us we'll be able to dig into, despite the fact that the Arizona Cardinals are not favored in this game. They are underdogs at, I believe this is a home game. I'll double check if it is against the Texans on the road. But it is something that I'm very excited to be able to take a look and dig into some of this film that you've gotten, guys.
Oh, good. I didn't know it was giving me some sort of prompt or whatnot. So on this one, this is the first snap that I pulled up here. I got like maybe like 5 or 6 that I could show, but just doing it in rapid fire, not trying to fully break down on these. But some of the stuff that I noticed, the feet, he is very light on his feet. He is very loud. You see him when he engages on the defensive tackle right here, trying to give up that inside shoulder. He cuts him off. Then he gets, obviously tossed up. At that point, what defensive tackles are trying to do is trying to open the gate on this offensive lineman. He does not give that up. And then he starts generating some pushback. This right here, I believe, is just like a simple, not sure if this is just a man, blocking scheme over here for this run and whatnot, because everybody has their guy. Obviously, you see Froholt take off to the second level. This is the type of stuff that I was talking about when I mentioned, there's little subtle details that are kind of throwing this off. Oh, sorry. I went ahead and recorded something right there. So he cuts it off and then goes into the traffic right there when he could have just cut to the right and then gotten more extra yards. All right. So here's my second snap right here. I'm not sure. No, that's my, sorry. All right. So here we go. All right. So you got both Adams and you got John Gaines over here. I think this is another very positive snap that I saw. Okay, so generating the pushback by the defensive tackle, getting that bull rush. At that point, when you see a guard arching their back, that's not a very good position to be in. You're giving up the leverage. You obviously want to drop anchor and try to push in, try to drop anchor and not give up any more yards at that point. But he stays composed. The guy actually ends up slipping.
Yeah,
giving him because he loses his balance, and I believe it's when he's trying to generate that pushback is where he kind of takes on the bull rush, keeps at it, generates a little bit of pushback, guy slips, and he takes control again.
This is one where it seems like whether it's a coverage sack or Jacoby just holding onto the ball too long, the protection is there. And that's something at least that's there is that you can see even with Jared Verse, they kind of they slide through, they get past at least for each of those. And it turns into where eventually 91's able to get home with Byron Young, but it takes a while because just as Jacoby should have gotten rid of the ball before them, which means that either it's going to be a coverage sack, or you can see one of the calls, at least on offense, two guys are just sitting there short of the six, standing there against zone coverage, waiting for the ball. Ball just needs to either be out or is targeted for a deep throw. They're trying to open it up for someone else, and the coverage is just too good downfield.
Yeah, this is a nice pocket right here. You got it wide open. If there's somebody sitting on it, which you can obviously see, there's a helmet right there. Obvious, if you're trying to throw that ball, you're going to throw it to the inside, towards the hash mark, more so than obviously not on the numbers, because that's going to end up becoming like a play. Yeah, Michael Carter over here that you could dump it off to. They're just check downs at that point. So if he was trying to target deep to short, this ball needs to come out because they went over that 2.5 second threshold. They actually held up for 3 seconds, which is a very good pass protection. All right, Let's go to our next one over here. Same view. I really don't like this view when I'm. That's why I like the film they used to be able to get. So going into I formation. Oh, okay, I love. So
Good block.
The reach block is one of the, and if it's one of the hardest blocks to be able to do in the NFL when it comes to run block. And obviously 71. I don't believe he reach blocks over here. No, he has the leverage advantage, but he's able to completely seal him out of the play. He gets parallel with him, generates a little bit of pushback. He engages with his inside, with his shoulder, running parallel to the line of scrimmage, and then he seals him out completely.
Yep.
And is able to just hang. Like, there's no more momentum for number 90. He's just gives up on that play essentially because he seals him out. And this is another one of those run plays that I've mentioned before that, like, details are what's kind of screwing us when it comes to like being able to generate any type of yards. You typically want 5 yards. That's a successful play, even 4 yards. But you can't even get to the line of scrimmage here. And I believe what was supposed to be the target here in this I formation. Higgins is obviously the H back in this situation right here. I think what should have happened is Isaiah Adams should have. So obviously they're going to try to double team here. His job is to try to push this guy and try to help Froholt so that he can get this block and hopefully reach around him so he can reach block him, and then he moves up to the second level. He doesn't really help him here. I feel like he kind of abandons him. And as you can see, 95 is the one who makes the play here. And that's just that subtle detail.
Yep, it's just a small detail, and those details add up over the course of the season, unfortunately. One of the things I think that we can talk about as well was this game plan that the Cardinals rolled out with. They had a very much rush for drop 7 game plan. They did not get additional pressure on Matthew Stafford. They did not blitz. Stafford, we know, is able to dice up the blitz. But it was something that really, the positives that we can talk about with this offensive line, couldn't say the same, at least for the defense. Nick Rallis actually went out there and said that he had a really difficult time accepting the game plan. He said that he didn't like the plan. And so when you say, well, I don't like the plan, when he's talking about it, he says that there's a lot of things that the defense could have done better. He gave at least and said that he took a blame for it, said, I didn't give guys the chances to go out there and execute and win downs. We got to set up a better plan than we did. Yes. This is one of those areas, which is good, because then you can say the next time you play the Rams, you can say, did you set up a better spot for it? And one of the things, at least, that we can talk about is that Nick Rallis and the defense needs to be improved. When he said that he didn't like the plan when he walked out of the stadium, part of it we feel like has been, this is like the Jonathan Gannon staple, has been rush 4, play a lot of quarters and cover 3 to be able to keep the defense in front of you. What we saw with the Rams was they were able to run the ball up against the Cardinals front effectively. They ran for 5.5 yards per play. And with Puka, they were able to get him into motion, get guys off of their step, where they were able to use double moves to get past and over and basically throw over that cover 2. It was definitely, as accelerator, I think we put out, said worst Cardinals defensive performance since the 80s. It was one of the worst ones up there. It was up there with the Steve Wilkes defense against the Los Angeles Rams, the game I believe David Johnson threw a touchdown in, and was not a good overall game plan. I'll see if I can show a little bit at least of, before we wrap up in the show, a little bit of some of those snaps. I'll have to pull up the film for it, but it was really just not good as far as it comes to with the Arizona Cardinals and how the defensive game plan went around. They're going to need to update it very quickly because they've got a rough upcoming matchup against the Texans and their offense, which has gotten healthier with both of their receivers back, Christian Kirk being back. And it's going to be an interesting matchup that we'll be able to say one way they can take advantage of it. But it is something where the defense is going to have to get much better, because otherwise they're going to be entering a game where you're going to want to hold the Texans to a low scoring amount so that your passing offense can keep up. And instead, what I think is going to happen is that you could give up a bunch more long and deep plays, give up plays against the run game too, what's been a difficult to watch Texans offense at times. Reason for doing all of that would be ultimately you would have not changed your game plan. Cardinals need to do that this week if they're going to have a chance against Houston.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that I kind of wanted to highlight was, what you were mentioning about the defense. They only blitzed one time. That's all they did. A true blitz, not like a 5-man front, which was when I filtered out what I was filtering out for the defense and whatnot. That was 5-man fronts that were being called a blitz. Technically, they hardly went with those. So yeah, they were running on light boxes all day long and whatnot, and that's exactly why we basically. And this is the one that I was talking about right here. This one irritates me because this is classic. Like this has 2019 Cardinals and even 2019 Seahawks defense, where the defensive coordinators love the philosophy of the blitz. Obviously, Vance Joseph was part of that. So you see, he's showing his hand here, gets to the line of scrimmage. Obviously, they're going to notice that. They're going to pick it up after he decides, hey, you know what? Instead of checking out of this play, because they know what we're going to do, let's go ahead and send the blitz anyway.
Yep.
He got picked up. So that's it. And they gave up after that. Basically, they just said, okay, we tried.
Yep.
We're just going to
We tried to blitz. We're just going to do our best to contain it. It did feel like it was one of those places of, like you said, that they gave up. Let's go ahead here and take a look at one of the other plays that we can talk about as far as just this defensive game plan from Arizona. This is a deep pass in the middle of the field to Puka Nacua. You're going to see here, at least with Puka lined up outside, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys on the line. Look how many guys actually are going to go. Rush 4, drop 7. And then Puka Nacua just goes right over the middle. It's a great throw by Stafford, but ultimately look at the amount of pressure that they actually get on Matthew Stafford off of this deep drop back. He's standing nice and dry. This was essentially a lot of what we got to see was that the Cardinals couldn't stop the run up the middle. They're getting 5.5 yards, and that just allowed the Rams to carve up the Cardinals. They didn't even have to go under center. They were able just to drop back like this, at least out of the shotgun, throw the ball. And while granted, Stafford is playing at a Pro Bowl level, and you got some backups in there and Denzel Burke, etc. Like, you're talking at least about this was basically the game plan. Here's another game plan pass to Puka Nacua for 32 yards that had Garrett Williams on the coverage. Rush 4, deep drop, completely dry, middle of the field with the deep coverage. And when you're talking about how it happened with this is just going to be what happens when you're going to drop back and play zone and not make the quarterback have to think and not get any pressure on the quarterback. You can see here they got 4 guys that are rushing the passer. He knows that he's got the inside hip leverage, at least right there. He's got the outside leverage, and so then all he does is basically just crosses over past as the route gets open up for him by number 13. You can see he passes off the coverage over here to Burke. He just rounds out at least. All this is just basically a post route coverage. They round it out. All that they're doing is just looking at the zone, and there's time. If you're going to be able to play drop 7 and rush 4, you have to get pressure with 4, because otherwise a quarterback like Matthew Stafford's going to drop back and take these shot plays all day right in the middle of the zone. Puka, of course, we know can get yards after the catch, and that was basically the story of the day for the Arizona Cardinals. They just got carved up with playing that zone coverage, and it's a shame because, Marcos, I do think that the Cardinals had an opportunity to be able to make some noise if they had either on offense been able to keep up with the Rams with being able to run the ball a bit more. They were having to throw the ball nonstop, had all sorts of 3-and-outs, whereas the Rams were able to do whatever they wanted to the Cardinals on defense. Like we said, one of the worst performances that we got to see of the Cardinals this past year. And I, unfortunately, Marcos, don't think that it's going to get much easier for Arizona. They're going to be playing a top defense next week with the Houston Texans, and the matchups are not quite that favorable. Before we go and move back onto that, was there anything else you had as far as with film segments or stuff you wanted to look at, some plays, or any other players that did stand out to you for the Arizona Cardinals up against the Los Angeles Rams?
Yes, Michael Wilson. I have actually
Hmm.
played to be able to show that, and I did want to make the comparison because of the fact that now you know how the scouts were talking about how somebody by the name of Devontae Adams, we faced them, that they're very similar when it comes to like their releases and whatnot. I'll go ahead and share the screen right now. They do this hop stutter release. I think Michael Wilson's still refining it. He's still trying to get it to where it's kind of like the same way as someone like Devontae Adams. You're not supposed to leave the ground with both of your feet off the line of scrimmage because of the fact that you can get jammed, especially when they're in press coverage. But he does it all the time. As you can see, he leaves the ground for like almost half a second. Guy decides, hey, you're gonna do that jam? Nope, and he gets right past him.
Yep.
So that's something that I think he picked up
Denzel
from.
Burke, yeah, Denzel Burke needs to work a little bit more on just the hands and being able to play, but he's a little bit too far off. Like, if you're going to be in man coverage, you got to be closer so you can actually put hands on the guy. I don't like the way that coverage looks, right, just from the get go.
Right, I get why he was off that far, but he shouldn't have jammed. He should know that if you're gonna jam a
Yeah,
receiver like this who's been in the NFL for this long, he knows you're gonna jam him because you're gonna panic, and then he's gonna take advantage of that because he just sees it coming. He swipes it off like he's a pass rusher. All right, let's go to Michael Wilson because I love this release right here by Michael Wilson. I believe he's going up against Killer Witherspoon, pretty tall cornerback and whatnot. The guy that intercepted the ball last year and made that crazy interception. And so he shuffles and then releases to the outside, pulls back. Obviously, he was selling the go route just like he did. If this was a must outside release, he did it to perfection. Kittle can't even get a hand on him because of the fact that he turns it upfield, turns back, tries to sell the fade or the go route, and then turns around last second and is able to get all that separation right there.
yeah,
Turns him around, and Killer Witherspoon is not like a scrub. I mean, he's
yep,
not a Pro Bowl type of cornerback, but he's also not somebody that like he just gives that up. And I believe I have one more when it comes to Michael Wilson, just showing the physicality. If we can't find it, we could just move on.
yep. Look at this. Breaks the tackle, moves and navigates his way out of bounds, but yeah, broken tackle there. Beautiful.
All right, let's see. I believe it's this one. I'm not sure. I had one that was saved up where he was not this one ain't it. The one that I was showing is like same thing, selling the route upfield, and then he just like creates a separation by getting away with like a little bit of a push off.
Yeah, the
But
back shoulder fade that he had, at least, where he's able to kind of just to kind of clear the guy out of his way, and then being able to have that back shoulder fade be set was definitely a beautiful play because we talked about how last year, there we go, Michael Wilson wasn't really getting the opportunity because they were targeting Marvin Harrison Jr. so much, and one of the things that they really needed at least was, I believe that was the
that was Michael Carter, not Michael
Michael
Wilson.
Carter were getting him. Yep. Yeah, Michael Carter at least just went and
Pass
did a
protect.
huge block there in pass protection. You can see how number 3 is lined up over the side there. He just blew him up as he came in. This is the back shoulder fade touchdown, I believe. I can recognize this play. Oh no, this isn't the play. This is the
I need to do
previous
a good
touchdown
job.
that he had, at least, where they did the just the over route, at least.
I need to do a better job being able to like separate these because of the fact that like I do this constantly. I save this, I save film and whatnot, and then I label it, and it's just not labeled properly. This one ain't it either, so I'm sure I'm not gonna find it. But either way, I like this throw right here.
Yeah, this is one that was, I believe, was an over in the middle throw. We talk about with the throwing over in the middle, hitting guys in stride. Michael Wilson, of course, breaks the tackle, is just barely able to get tackled by his shoestrings there in order to break a even bigger yard after the catch run, getting into Rams territory there. Gotta love to see that.
He also uses leverage. I think he would. I'm not sure. I think Killer Witherspoon had inside leverage on here, and he was able to bait him outside and then cut it inside for a quick slant catch, and then obviously a like almost a broken tackle. That would have been probably to the house if he was able to break that. I don't think I'm gonna find it. I
Yep.
think
That's good, at least for that one, because that'll time in really well with what we can talk about with this upcoming preview for the game. We've got, at least, of course, the funniest prediction I think of all time here: Cards 97, Texans 13. Gotta
Wow.
love that prediction there, of course, from Raiders fan. No, I think
Yeah.
this is one of those areas where I think that the Texans, what you want to make sure is that you close this game. If it's a 20-13 loss for Arizona, it's another close loss. Texans, at least, you'll be able to get pushed back on because of just the way that some of those matchups work for Arizona. For example, when I show here on the screen, one of the biggest takeaways that you'll have here is Josh Sweat against, I believe it's Devontae Ursay. But he's the rookie left tackle, one of the lowest ranked tackles overall in the league. Trent Brown is much better, but he was not practicing this past week. The real area that's going to be interesting to see match it up will be Will Johnson against Nico Collins. How does Garrett Williams do now that he's been back? The rookie in Higgins has played well. And, of course, Christian Kirk in the slot is going to get Denzel Burke. Some of these guys are not going to be in there in the matchup, like Akeem Davis-Gaither. We'll see if he was hurt. Jalen Thompson, of course, is not practicing. Budda Baker this year has been 87th of 96 safeties. He has just not been utilized against the run the same way he was last year. Because the Cardinals are playing so much nickel coverage, he's been back in coverage a lot, and it just is not one of his skill sets or strengths. The concern that I have, Marcos, is when you take a look at this matchup here, you got Danielle Hunter against Josh Fryer, and you got Will Anderson against Kelvin Beachum, plus Sheldon Rankins has been playing pretty well in the middle of it. I think that matchup is far too much for Arizona. I think that the biggest concern I'll have for this game is getting Jacoby Brissett out healthy is the biggest thing that I'm looking for. Derek Stingley's been having a bit of a down year, but he's still going to be lined up against Michael Wilson if Marvin Harrison Jr. is not good to go. And we'll see if Kwame Lassiter, who did not practice today, is able to go or not as well. But I don't like this matchup for Arizona. I could see this being a 30-point game for the Texans, and a 17-22 would be if you can close the gap a little bit late game for the Cardinals.
Yeah, our best defense is going to be basically what we're going to have to do is play a lot of ball control, but we're going to have to do it against this defense. If we have an encore performance from the guards and they can just hold up, see, this is what I'm afraid of. Knowing this organization, when Evan Brown is good to go, we're just going to send John Gaines back to the bench. The differences between both of them is not going to be as as great because of the fact that Evan Brown hasn't been having a good season. So if you're not going to keep him long term and you have John Gaines and you want to develop him and he can show you what he can do, he's a very athletic, very limber type of guard. And if you're putting him at left guard and he found his niche there, you definitely want to keep him there and try to develop him, because this is going to be a coup if you develop both him and Adams at their respective positions. So if they have an encore performance, Yalte Froholt getting good communication between both of them. I saw them passing off stunts very well, which is obviously what these Texans will do a lot of. They'll be trying to exploit this offensive line with stunts, especially since left tackle is not going to be there in Paris Johnson and whatnot. So I've seen them doing a better job with that. I really hope they can surprise people, because if they're able to have like at least a very surprising effort versus this defensive line and whatnot, maybe it'll get people more serious about this offensive line just needing a few more pieces.
Yeah, I think that like you said, I think the defense is going to have to carry and be able to be the team that can match up. And there's a lot of guys that are hurt this week. I think the defense is going to have to attack the Texans offense in order to be able to actually have a chance in this game. Next week is going to be a tough one, too. The Atlanta Falcons, I think, is the most winnable game. We'll have to see if Paris Johnson still misses time, if he'll come back, because they've got some good edge rushers. They got a playmaker at safety, another good player at safety. A.J. Terrell has not had the best year, but he's a good cover corner. It's going to be interesting to see, because Marcos will talk about this next week. The Cardinals' best chance to win a game, I think, is going to be, if not for Jimmy Garoppolo starting with the Rams, and even then we'll see Cardinals have struggled against backup quarterbacks this year. This Falcons game may be their best chance at a win in the last part of this season, pending the results of the Texans game. Let's go ahead and start to wrap it up with on this show. We're going to go move into overtime now with some of your comments that we've got. We got AZ Jace popping in saying Michael Wilson 14 was a dog and has always been. Joe Alt was always the pick. Joe Alt is hurt right now. Marvin Harrison Jr. hurt right now. Who was the other player that they had in New York? I believe it was with the this is going to drive me crazy at least.
I know who you're talking about as a wide receiver, right?
Yeah, he's on IR at least as well with Malik
Malik
Neighbors. Sorry,
Neighbors.
I couldn't think of where it was. He's on IR right now. Like all of that class has been hurt for the most part. So I think that it's like one of the cases where for me, I view it as a positive where I think the Cardinals could potentially benefit if they're able to get a right tackle next year with Jacoby and find whoever that player is going to be. You could have two number one receivers, a good right tackle, a stellar left tackle, and be all set to go in that regards. At the same point, you could say having a run blocking guy on a team that wants to run the football and trying to draft Marv out of the talent aspect, only to kind of stumble into this Michael Wilson thing, is really interesting because it could be a huge negative for the Cardinals if Marvin Harrison Jr. does not turn out to be that same sort of player that we expected him to be, this all pro, all world, get his name up there on the banners with Larry Fitzgerald as one of the next great Cardinal receivers. That has not been the case so far, and we'll have to see. I think it's going to take a brand new offensive coordinator and a new wide receivers coach in order for him to reach his area. That has not been the case for Michael Wilson, who in his X receiver role, and this is maybe just some of what I've felt, Marcos, Michael Wilson should have been your X receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr. should have been your flanker receiver. Things would have been a lot easier if the Cardinals had switched those two positions. To me, that falls on coaching and not adapting to what you needed to adapt to when it became clear throughout this season. You needed to move Marvin around, use him in the middle of the field, and you could put Michael Wilson outside. You had to throw the ball to both of them. You got to throw the ball somehow to Trey McBride in this offense. I think it's a positive for the Cardinals, but like you said, they're missing a right tackle, and so you could be going into the next year and talking about, hey, well, look who the wide receiver in round 2 we're pairing with Michael Wilson is. We've got Joe Alt coming back next year alongside Paris Johnson Jr., and the run game would have probably been a lot more solid. Instead, we're kind of in this spot where receivers are right now, plenty as far as starting caliber guys, and yet the Cardinals rushing attack, which would have been a huge portion with, as AG Jace is saying, would have been beneficial to have had that guy there, given how poor the run has been this year.
The best ability is availability. So
Mm-hmm.
Joe Alt,
I always say that.
if he had gone injured, and he would have just been gone anyway. But I'm a big Marvin Harrison Jr. fan. I think if you're gonna use him on motion snaps, I don't know if send him over the middle is gonna be such a good idea, because you've already seen it where he gets kind of like in his own head and he's about to get blown up. He gets that ball, and he doesn't like really nail down on it or try to like grip it like, hey, it's my ball. So I don't know if I would agree with him at least going over the middle, but moving him around is definitely something that.
Yeah, you got Trey McBride already is there to go through the middle. You kind of expected, but Marv's best routes have been kind of some of these crossing patterns, and
Yeah.
so it's been interesting for how little mesh concepts we've actually seen the Cardinals run this year. Given that last question and comment that we have is, there's got to be a way to force Bidwell into being more of a hands-off owner. There's only two things you can do, because guess what? You can't force him. It's his team. It's his money. It's ultimately his organization. I think that hiring a team president to be able to manage the day-to-day tasks would have been the best benefit instead of Michael directly managing. But then Michael doesn't get the credit for any sort of turnaround that would cause. The only other things you can control is your dollars that you're spending.
Yeah.
Do you go to the game? Do you spend season tickets? I know a lot of season ticket holders, like at least 80 or so, are not renewing their season tickets for next year. We'll see if those get filled or if they're just going to be sitting empty for next year. And the only other way is in media, being able to hold people accountable, being able to actually force change through being able to have commentary. One of the biggest things I credit media for was Michael went out, hired a GM from outside the organization, got one of the better regarded coaches from outside the organization. A needed change that the Cardinals had to have coming off of the Cliff and Keim regime, as it were, was due to, I believe, media telling Michael he had to go outside of the organization to bring in some new blood. And I think there's a lot of positive changes that we can see from the Cardinals. Unfortunately, it hasn't turned into positive change for this season, Marcos.
Yeah, unfortunately, like you mentioned, the only thing that we can control is going to the games, our dollars, public pressure, being in kind of a united front. Those would be also the other type of stuff. But yeah, I would love for our owner to be. I was just thinking about this today. He's always in these flight plans that we have because he's like front and center in operations and whatnot. And then I go pay attention to other teams and their owners out there, good, like going or taking trips all over the world, like going up Mount Everest and going to other countries, golfing, doing all sorts of stuff. And then whenever the VP has to call him or the president has to call him, just call him and, hey,
Yep.
look, that's what we're deciding. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, go back to doing what you're doing. Yeah.
Yep. Go back to where it is. Let the team be managed. That's the hope. We'll see if the Cardinals ever get to that point. For the meantime, though, this has been what we can talk about, which is some good play from some young players. Marcos, this is the end of our show. We're basically hitting the log off portion. Can you go and shout out where our viewers and listeners can find you and your content?
You guys can find me at Pancake Soul or Pancake Soul on the X account. Obviously, my handle has been, you have my handle right there, and you can find the videos. Obviously, like I keep mentioning, like the keep forgetting what the I can't believe I forgot what the name was, but our past like channels and our past like videos and whatnot under the TCR umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure at least, obviously, you're following our Redbird Reboots Twitter account. Follow me at Blake Murphy7. Follow TCR. Make sure that we're going to be following the Cardinal rule. That's where all of our channel content is going to be for you. Bird and Goal, unfortunately, they did have to cancel late. One of their members is sick, so Bird and Goal will not be up next, but we're here to be able to log off now and say so long to all you guys who are fans. As Classy Nasty would say, deuces to you guys, and we'll be back next week with a recap of the Cardinals Texans football game for you guys. Thanks again so much for tuning in, and go Cards.
All right, you guys have a good one.